On the night of March 2nd, 1998, Suzanne Lyall stepped off a city bus at the edge of her college campus. She had just finished her part-time shift at a tech store in the Crossgates Mall. The walk from the bus stop to her dorm should have taken no more than 10 minutes. But Suzanne never walked through the door. She was 19 years old, a college sophomore, bright, quiet, thoughtful, focused on computer science, and loved by the people closest to her. She was the kind of person who noticed small details, who followed routines, who didn't make reckless decisions. And that's what makes this story so haunting. There was no storm that night, no reports of screams, no signs of struggle. She simply vanished in the short space between public transportation and the supposed safety of her dorm room. She never called anyone. She never used her ID again. Her phone was silent. Her body was never found. When her parents realized something was wrong the next morning, they acted immediately. They called campus police. They reached out to her friends. They retraced her steps. But from the very start, they were met with delays. Authorities treated it as a case of a college student blowing off steam. They waited, but Suzanne's parents couldn't. They knew their daughter. They knew something wasn't right. By the time police began taking it seriously, crucial time had already passed. Security footage was missing. Witness memories began to blur, and whatever clues might have existed started to slip away. There was a single ATM withdrawal made around 4 a.m. the next morning using Suzanne's bank card. It wasn't a large amount, just $20, but it came from a machine with no working surveillance camera. To this day, no one knows if it was Suzanne who made that withdrawal or someone else. Investigators turned to those closest to her. Friends, classmates, a long-term boyfriend. Questions were asked, alibis were offered, but nothing stuck. No one was ever arrested. No charges were ever filed. Suzanne's room remained untouched. Her parents never stopped looking. The search spread across counties, across months, across years, but the answers never came. And now, over 2 decades later, her disappearance remains one of New York State's most unsettling mysteries. No closure, no justice, just a silence that never lifted. So what really happened to Suzanne Lyall on that cold March night? And why has no one been able or willing to answer that question? This is the story of Suzanne Lyall, and this is where it begins. Suzanne Gloria Lyall was born on April 6, 1978, in Saratoga Springs, New York. The youngest of 3 children, quiet, intelligent, and deeply thoughtful. From beginning, Suzanne didn't draw attention to herself, but she left a lasting impression on everyone who met her. She was careful, responsible, and deeply curious about how things worked. In high school, Suzanne developed a strong interest in computers, something still uncommon at the time, especially for young women. She was sharp, technical, focused, while others drifted between hobbies. Suzanne found her passion early and stuck to it. She was the kind of person who kept her circle small, but once you were in, you stayed there. By the time she turned 19, she had already started building a future. Suzanne was a sophomore at the University at Albany, studying computer science. She commuted to campus from her family's home in Ballston Spa. It was a compromise, close enough to be independent, close enough to stay grounded. During the week, she juggled her classes and her part-time job at a tech store called Babbage's, located inside Crossgates Mall. She didn't love the job, but she was proud of it. She took pride in earning her own money. Suzanne didn't drink. She didn't party. She wasn't the kind of student who skipped class or left without telling anyone. Her life was structured, predictable, safe, and that's what made what happened to her so impossible to understand. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, there were small signs of tension. Her relationship with her longtime boyfriend, Richard Condon, had become strained. There were rumors that she had tried to end things. Some of her friends described the relationship as controlling. But Suzanne wasn't the type to share everything, not even with those closest to her. On March 2nd, 1998, Suzanne woke up and went about her day. She attended classes. She showed up for work at Babbage's on time. Before her shift, she called her mother and asked her to transfer $20 into her bank account. It was a simple request. Nothing unusual. She sounded calm. That would be the last time her mother ever heard her voice. Her shift at the mall ended at 9:45 p.m. Suzanne clocked out, walked through the building's side entrance, and boarded the CTA bus that would take her back to campus. She sat quietly during the ride, alone. No one joined her. No one followed her. Around 10:30 p.m., she stepped off the bus at Collins Circle, the main campus stop near her dorm building, and that's where the trail ends. There were no confirmed sightings of her after that moment. She didn't use her key card to enter the dorm. Her roommate didn't hear her come in. Her bed wasn't slept in. Her phone was silent. Her computer unopened. The clothes she wore to work were never found. Her father later described it as walking off the edge of the world. The next morning, Suzanne didn't show up to her computer science class. No one saw her in the dining hall. No messages. No calls. When her parents couldn't reach her by the afternoon, they drove to the university. They found her room untouched. Her belongings were neatly arranged. Her uniform was folded. Her things were all in place. Except for her. The hours that followed were critical. But campus police hesitated. They treated it like a case of a college student skipping class or needing space. They told her parents to wait. But her parents already knew. Suzanne would not have disappeared on her own. By the time the investigation truly began, the window for finding her had already started to close. It was just a 5-minute walk. That's all it should have been. From the bus stop at Collins Circle to Suzanne Lyall's dormitory at SUNY Albany. A straight, familiar path. One she had taken many times before. But that night, something changed. Suzanne stepped off a city bus at approximately 10:30 p.m. She was alone. One witness claimed they saw her exit the bus and begin walking toward the direction of the dorms. But no one can say what happened after that. There were no campus surveillance cameras in that area. No security officers stationed along the route. Just streetlights, a few trees, and a long stretch of sidewalk disappearing into the dark. Her dorm was less than 300 feet away, but Suzanne never made it inside. She didn't use her access card to open the dorm's main door. There was no sign of forced entry. No belongings dropped. No indications of a struggle. Just silence, as if she had vanished between one breath and the next. Inside her room, everything appeared untouched. Her work clothes weren't there. Her purse was missing, but her ID, her makeup, and other personal belongings were left behind. Her roommate hadn't seen her. Her bed was still made. Her computer was off. Hours passed. Then a full day. Friends noticed her absence. Professors noted she hadn't attended class. But it wasn't until her parents arrived that the weight of what had happened finally began to register. Meanwhile, in the early morning hours of March 3rd, just hours after she was last seen, someone withdrew $20 from Suzanne's bank account using her ATM card. The transaction occurred around 4 a.m. at a convenience store just off campus. But the ATM's camera wasn't working. No footage was ever recovered. There's been debate ever since about whether it was Suzanne who made that withdrawal or someone else. The timing is strange. Suzanne was never known to make withdrawals in the middle of the night. And if she were in trouble, why would she stop at an ATM? Investigators searched the surrounding woods and walkways. Police dogs were brought in. Canvassing was done around the dorms, the mall, and the bus route. But no scent trail was picked up. No evidence of an altercation. Nothing. The most chilling detail of all is how fast it happened. A single decision. A brief window. A college campus that should have been full of noise, activity, people, and yet no witnesses, no answers. Suzanne Lyall was gone, and the moment of her disappearance remains invisible. No cameras, no screams, no witnesses, just a cold stretch of sidewalk, and a question that's never been answered. When Suzanne Lyall was reported missing, the urgency her parents felt was not shared by campus police. They were told not to panic, that it wasn't unusual for college students to disappear for a day or two, that maybe she had gone off with friends, that maybe she just needed space. But Doug and Mary Lyall knew their daughter. She wasn't impulsive. She wasn't unpredictable. She didn't vanish without reason, but those first hours were lost. It wasn't until March 4th, 2 full days after she was last seen, that the case was escalated beyond campus security. By then, precious time had passed. Surveillance footage that might have existed had already been overwritten. Memories had begun to fade. New York State Police took over the case. Investigators began retracing Suzanne's last known movements. They spoke to co-workers at Babbage's, bus drivers, students on campus. They analyzed her schedule, her phone records, her bank account, but there was no pattern, no sudden change, no obvious sign that she was planning to run away. Her last ATM withdrawal, the $20, was treated as a potential lead, but the machine had no functioning camera and the location yielded no new information. Whether she made that withdrawal herself or someone else used her card remains unanswered to this day. Detectives turned their attention to the people closest to her. Richard Condon, her longtime boyfriend, quickly became a person of interest. They had been together for several years. Suzanne had reportedly voiced concerns to friends that she felt smothered, that she was trying to pull away. Some say she had tried to break up with him. Others weren't sure. Richard was questioned. He admitted they had been arguing, but he denied any involvement. He refused to take a polygraph, lawyered up early, offered limited cooperation, but there was no physical evidence tying him or anyone to her disappearance. Authorities explored the route between the bus stop and the dorm. Search teams combed nearby wooded areas. Police dogs were brought in. Ground and aerial searches were conducted, but every lead collapsed into the same silence. The Lyalls pushed for media coverage. They appeared at press conferences, held vigils, passed out flyers, spoke to anyone who would listen, and slowly, the story began to spread. Local news picked it up, then state news, and eventually national coverage. But the exposure didn't bring answers. It brought tips, false sightings, rumors, none of them useful. At times, it seemed like more effort was coming from Suzanne's family than the system responsible for finding her. They kept records, timelines, notes. They called in favors, hired private investigators, kept pressing forward while law enforcement quietly scaled back. And with no suspects, no arrests, and no sign of Suzanne, the case slowly began to cool. But to her parents, it never did. Each morning, they woke up to the same truth. Their daughter was gone. And no one, not even the authorities, could explain why. In the absence of hard evidence, theories began to fill the silence. Some were grounded in the facts. Others stretched into speculation. But all of them led to the same place. No clear answers, only more questions. The most scrutinized person in Suzanne Lyall's life was her boyfriend, Richard Condon. They had been together since high school. By 1998, the relationship had started to show signs of strain. Suzanne had reportedly confided in friends that she wanted space, that she felt overwhelmed. One friend claimed Suzanne said she was afraid of how he might react if she ended things. Richard denied any wrongdoing. He told investigators he hadn't seen Suzanne the night she disappeared. He refused a polygraph. Lawyering up early, he claimed he had nothing to hide, but offered no real explanation for his refusal. To many, it raised red flags. But without a confession or physical evidence, suspicion couldn't become prosecution. Then there was the ATM withdrawal. $20 taken out in the early morning hours of March 3rd. Some believe Suzanne made that withdrawal. Others argue it may have been someone else using her card. But no one could say for sure. The ATM camera wasn't working. There were no eyewitnesses, and whoever was there left no trace. Police considered the possibility of a stranger abduction, someone following her off the bus, someone who waited in the shadows between the bus stop and her dorm. But that theory raised questions, too. How did an abductor pull her away without making a sound, without leaving anything behind? Others suggested she may have willingly met up with someone she knew, that she never intended to go straight to her dorm, that she was led away under false pretenses. But if that were the case, who was she meeting? And why would she leave her routine, her safety, her world, without telling a soul? As time passed, more theories emerged. that she was taken by someone on campus, that she may have been trafficked, that someone with access to the university or knowledge of her schedule used that night to disappear her. But every theory ran into the same wall. There was no crime scene, no struggle, no evidence to point to one version of events over another. Even her personality became a point of debate. Some said she was too private, that she didn't share enough, making it harder to know what was happening behind the scenes. Others insisted she would never have walked off into the night with someone she didn't trust. And while the theories multiplied, none of them brought her back. No charges were ever filed. No arrests were made. No one ever confessed. Everyone became a suspect, and no one did. The questions only grew darker with time. If it was someone close to her, how did they hide it so well? If it was a stranger, how did they make her vanish without a sound? And if it was someone Suzanne trusted, how long had they been planning it? The days turned to weeks. The media attention faded. And with every passing headline, the silence around Suzanne Lyall's case only grew heavier. But behind closed doors, her parents refused to let the search die. Doug and Mary Lyall became investigators in their own right. They created detailed timelines, tracked every phone call, logged every tip. They made themselves available to the press. They pushed law enforcement for answers. They did everything they could because no one else seemed to be doing enough. Still, the case remained frozen. Then, in the early 2000s, something shifted. A few developments brought temporary hope. Suzanne's ID badge, her campus access card, was discovered missing. It hadn't been used since her disappearance. But someone at some point had tried to use her student login credentials to access her university account. The attempt failed, and it couldn't be traced. But it raised new questions. Was someone trying to cover their tracks? Or was it Suzanne herself, reaching out silently from wherever she was? Investigators also began re-examining people close to her. Her boyfriend's refusal to take a polygraph continued to cast a long shadow. His lack of public engagement only deepened the suspicion. But still, there was no direct link tying him or anyone else to her disappearance. There was a moment when it seemed like the case might finally break open. In 2001, the Lyalls received a letter, an anonymous note. It referenced Suzanne, claimed to know what happened, and hinted at someone involved. It was unsigned, postmarked from Albany, and it never led to anything concrete. Just another cruel twist in a long line of frustrations. False leads became a pattern. Sightings that turned out to be other women. Tips that led nowhere. Psychics offering guesses dressed up as visions. Every glimmer of progress faded into another dead end. And then silence again. No arrests, no confession, no discovery of Suzanne's belongings, no remains. What broke was not the case, but the illusion that time would eventually bring answers. For Doug and Mary, the heartbreak was relentless. The constant loop of possibilities, the absence of closure, the quiet realization that justice might never come. But from that breaking point came something else. Determination. The Lyalls channeled their grief into advocacy. They began working with lawmakers, lobbying for change. They saw firsthand how missing persons cases, especially involving young adults, were often met with skepticism and delays. They wanted to make sure no other family had to go through what they were living. Out of their pain, they helped write legislation. They built a movement. But through it all, Suzanne remained missing, and the person responsible remained free. More than 2 decades have passed since Suzanne Lyall vanished. There have been no arrests, no recovery, no confirmed sightings. Only a trail of questions stretching across 26 years. The official investigation remains open, technically, but it's cold. Evidence is sparse. Leads have dried up. There are no new suspects. No renewed search efforts. Just aging files, faded posters, and the quiet erosion of time. Her family, however, never stopped searching. Doug and Mary Lyall transformed their grief into purpose. They created the Center for Hope, an organization dedicated to supporting families of the missing. They became advocates, activists, experts. They weren't just speaking for Suzanne anymore. They were speaking for every parent still waiting, every case still open, every name forgotten. They helped pass Suzanne's Law, a federal mandate requiring police to begin immediate investigations into missing persons between the ages of 18 and 21. Before this law, cases like Suzanne's could legally be put on hold. Now, they couldn't be ignored. The Lyalls changed the way missing persons cases are treated across the country. But what they couldn't change was what happened on March 2nd, 1998. In 2015, Suzanne was officially declared dead in the eyes of the state. There was no body, no crime scene. But after so many years, the system had moved forward. The family hadn't. To this day, Suzanne's disappearance remains one of the most unsettling, unresolved cases in New York State history. There are still theories. Some believe it was someone she knew. Others still point to a stranger. Occasionally, a tip surfaces, a rumor, a memory, but none of it has brought her home. Her dorm room no longer exists in its original form. Her classmates have moved on. Professors have retired. Babbage's is gone. The world has changed, but the loss remains frozen in time. Doug Lyall passed away in 2015. The same year his daughter was declared legally deceased. He died without ever learning what happened. Mary Lyall continues to fight. She still speaks, still answers calls, still waits. And somewhere out there, a person knows exactly what happened that night. A person who watched her vanish, who kept the secret, who never looked back. The case is still open, but the question remains. Who took Suzanne Lyall? And why has no one ever spoken her name with the truth? Suzanne Lyall walked into the night, carrying nothing but her work clothes, her purse, and a future full of possibilities. She was 19, brilliant, quiet, focused, loved. She should have made it home that night. But someone, somewhere, made sure she didn't. Her parents never stopped looking. Her friends never forgot. Her name still echoes through cold case units, advocacy groups, and the minds of those who followed every detail. And yet, the silence remains. Suzanne didn't vanish into thin air. Someone saw, someone heard, someone knows. This isn't just a missing persons case. It's a failure of urgency, of justice, of truth. The trail went cold. The leads went quiet. But the wound never healed. And for Mary Lyall, the waiting continues. Every year, she lights a candle. Every year, she speaks her daughter's name. Every year, she holds space for the answer that still hasn't come. The last confirmed moment of Suzanne Lyall's life was stepping off a bus, a short walk, a familiar path, and then nothing, but someone was there. Someone crossed that path with her, and that person has stayed silent for 26 years. If you know something, anything, there is still time. Come forward. You can help bring closure to a family that has spent decades in the dark. Suzanne Lyall mattered. She still does, and she still deserves answers. One question still remains. Who took her? If you have a theory, share below. If you believe stories like this still matter, subscribe. And if you think it's time for justice, help make sure Suzanne is never forgotten.